In July 2018, an orca named Tahlequah gave birth to a calf that lived for only 30 minutes. Instead of letting the body sink, she pushed it to the surface with her head, over and over, keeping it afloat. She did this for 17 days. Researchers with the Center for Whale Research tracked her pod across more than 1,000 miles of open water as she carried her dead calf the entire way, diving to retrieve it every time it slipped from her grasp. Other members of her pod taking turns supporting the body when she tired. There is no biological requirement for any of this. The calf could not be saved, could not be fed, could not benefit from any of it. Something else was happening, and marine biologists still don't have a clean word for what. Start with what's measurable. Orcas, like humans, have spindle neurons in the brain, specialized cells linked to social awareness and rapid emotional processing, once thought to exist only in primates. Researcher Lori Marino, who has spent decades studying cetacean cognition, has pointed out that orca brains contain structures related to emotional processing that are, in some respects, more elaborate than the human equivalent. The capacity for something resembling grief isn't a stretch based on the neuroanatomy. What's harder to establish is what 17 days of carrying a dead calf actually meant to Tahlequah, and researchers are careful not to claim more certainty than the data allows. What they will say is that this wasn't an isolated case. Calf-carrying behavior in orcas has been documented in multiple pods since, always following the same pattern: a mother refusing to let the body go for days at a time, at direct cost to her own feeding and energy reserves. Crows offer a stranger version of the same question because their response to death looks less like mourning and more like an investigation. In 2015, researcher Kaylee Swift at the University of Washington ran a series of experiments placing a taxidermied dead crow on the ground near a person holding food. Live crows didn't ignore it and didn't simply flee. They gathered. Groups of them assembled around the dead bird, some coming from several hundred meters away, calling loudly and refusing the food they'd normally have taken without hesitation. Swift's data showed something specific. Crows that witnessed a dead crow near a particular person avoided that person's face and location for days afterward, sometimes longer, and taught the association to other crows who hadn't witnessed the event firsthand. The gathering wasn't sentiment. It was forensic. The crows were using the death as evidence, extracting a threat assessment from it, and distributing that assessment through their social network, turning one crow's death into protective knowledge for crows that never met it. Elephants complicate the picture further because their behavior contains elements of both. Researchers in Amboseli, Kenya, led by Ian Douglas Hamilton and later Karen McComb, have documented elephants encountering the bones of dead elephants, including individuals unrelated to them, in stopping to investigate. They touch the skull and tusks with their trunks, sometimes for extended periods, turning bones over with unusual gentleness compared to how they interact with other objects in their environment. McComb's research specifically tested this. Elephants presented with elephant skulls, ivory, and wood of similar size and shape spent significantly more time investigating the elephant remains than the other objects, regardless of whether the remains belonged to a family member. That last detail matters. This isn't just family-specific attachment. Elephants appear to recognize their own species' remains as categorically different from anything else on the landscape and respond to that category with a behavior no other stimulus produces. Chimpanzees show something that sits closer to what a human observer would recognize immediately. At the Bosu research site in Guinea, primatologists have documented multiple cases of chimpanzee mothers carrying the bodies of their dead infants for days. In one extensively studied case for over 2 months, grooming the corpse and carrying it through normal daily movement even as it mummified. Researchers who documented the case, published in Current Biology in 2011, were careful about over-interpreting the behavior, but noted that the mother's activity patterns changed measurably during this period, and that other members of the group approached and inspected the body with behavior distinct from how they treated the mother normally. Something about the death registered across the group, not just for the mother carrying it. What connects an orca refusing to let go, a crow turning a body into a warning system, An elephant investigating a stranger's skull, and a chimpanzee carrying a mummified infant for 2 months is not a single shared emotion. Researchers are explicit that these are likely different underlying processes wearing a similar outward shape. The crow's response looks functional, almost procedural. The orcas and the chimpanzees look far harder to explain that way, given the direct cost to the mother's own survival with no offsetting benefit. What all four share is that death is not treated as a neutral event. Something in each of these animals registers it as data worth acting on, whether that action is threat avoidance, physical investigation, or refusing, for as long as biologically possible, to accept that the body in front of them no longer matters. Scientists remain divided on how far to take this. Comparative psychologists warn against assuming these behaviors map onto human grief, which is layered with language, ritual, and cultural meaning no other species has access to. But the same researchers are equally unwilling to dismiss the behaviors as empty reflex, because the costs some of these animals absorb. Tahlequah's lost feeding time, the Basu mother's 2 months of carrying dead weight through the forest canopy, don't fit a model where death means nothing to the animal experiencing it. Somewhere between this is grief exactly as humans understand it, and this is meaningless behavior sits the honest answer, and it's less satisfying than either extreme. Something happens in these animals when death enters their world. It is powerful enough to override ordinary self-interest, and we don't yet have the tools to say precisely what it is. Tahlequah eventually let her calf go on the 18th day, somewhere off the coast of Washington state. Researchers who had tracked her the entire time reported that within a day, she was observed foraging normally again, swimming with her pod as if nothing unusual had happened at all. Whatever 17 days of carrying a dead calf across 1,000 miles of ocean meant to her, it had an ending. It's the part in between that science still can't fully explain, and the part that makes it very hard to keep believing these animals are simply reacting to nothing.